With the second generation of QD-OLED panel, is the S95C the TV to beat in 2023? No, but it gets close. Hello and welcome to another video on AV Forums. I'm Phil Hinton, the site editor, and I'm a fully trained ISF and THX calibrator with 20 years of experience. In this video we are taking a look at the Samsung S95C QD-OLED TV. The S95C is available in 3 screen sizes, starting with this 55-inch retail sample, which at the time of this video in June 2023 sells for £2,699. There's a 65-inch at £3,599 and a massive 77-inch at £5,099. The TV we're reviewing is a retail purchased 55-inch set provided by UK retailer Peter Tyson, and it will be here for long-term testing and comparisons for at least the next 6 months. We thank Peter Tyson for their assistance in providing actual retail units to us, and if you want to support our video reviews and the channel and you're looking for a new TV, then please visit their e-commerce website at petertyson.co.uk or get more details in the video description below. Many thanks for your support. This year the S95C features what Samsung calls the One Infinity design, with a One Connect box that allows you to connect your sources to the box with one cable going to the TV. The One Connect box is a slim plastic rectangular affair with the inputs on the rear side and a power socket going to the separate side with some cable management. The sculpted plastic has ridged pattern and the box looks sleek. It can be left next to the TV or in an equipment rack, and it can also be attached to the rear of the TV stand. Connections wise, we have 4 full bandwidth 48 gigabits per second HDMI 2.1 inputs that support up to 4K 144Hz, 4K 120Hz, VRR, FreeSync Premium Pro, eARC and ARC on port 3 and ALLM. There are also 3 USB ports, a LAN, optical digital output, a CI slot, plus a dual satellite and 1 RF antenna. This retail set came with 2 provided remote controls. The first is a traditional black plastic affair with every button you should ever need, including a direct settings button, which you'll really need for quick access. The second remote is a short, stubby affair with a solar panel on the rear and USB-C charge port. It's a really pared down unit with just a few buttons and direct access video on demand keys. It is lightweight and it sits neatly in the hand, but it does take more button presses to find some settings due to the pared down design. We go into picture quality measurements in detail within the written review on AV Forums, so head over to read all the details on the out of the box and calibrated results there. We fully measured and tested the out-of-the-box settings, as well as calibrating the S95C and put it through some rigorous testing, including side-by-side comparisons with its closest rivals. If you want to know what the best settings are out of the box, then you can also check out our settings video. In HDR filmmaker mode, the Samsung 55-inch S95C measures in at 1340 nits on a 10% industry standard window and 272 nits full screen. This is around the same as the recently reviewed LG G3 in terms of peak and just slightly more at 100% full screen. This is an excellent result and points to improvements made in the second generation QD-OLED panel from Samsung Display that's really pushing the brightness capabilities. It should be noted that the S95C will go much brighter in other picture presets, but as we're only interested in accurate colour and accurate image quality to the standards here at AV Forums, we'll stick to filmmaker mode. Moving to PQ EOTF tracking to ST2084 standard, and in filmmaker mode it is accurate to the standards and it doesn't push brightness over the top. We also get slightly different tone maps depending on the mastering display metadata, with 1000 nits tracking accurately to the standard to the peak brightness and then at hard clips. With 4000 nit master content, the tracking is again accurate to the standard with just a slight roll off before a hard clip at the peak brightness, and that's in an attempt to keep highlight details without bringing down the overall picture level. Wide colour gamut performance was a little bit of a mixed bag on the Samsung S95C, as the brightness and volume are excellent, but the saturation tracking was a little off, especially the hue errors in magenta. This shouldn't impact too much on overall HDR10 viewing, with these errors unseen in the most part for actual film content. We measured BT 2020 at 73% XY and 75% UV, with P3 coming in at 100% XY and 99% UV. Starting with screen uniformity displaying a 5% brightness slide, and where last year's QD-OLEDs were very clean, this retail supplied 55-inch unit using the new 2023 panel was not quite as clean. We did note some slight darkening to the corners and very faint vertical strips. This is certainly not a deal breaker and is cleaner than the LG G3 retail TV, but it was interesting to note that the new panel is pushing more brightness this year and is showing a little bit in terms of uniformity issues. All other brightness level slides were very clean, with no signs of dirty screen effect DSE or vignetting to the panel edges. We also didn't see any tinting to white when looking at the panel from wider angles. The screen surface is also not overly reflective if it's used in a brighter room, but there is no polarizing filter on the front of the screen, so in ambient light the screen is not deep black, but more of a navy tone. This does affect dark scenes in movies when viewing in a room with lots of lighting, especially if it's hitting the screen surface. The LG G3, on the other hand, is deep black in the same surroundings. We didn't find any obvious issues with the motion reproduction, as 24 frames per second material is displayed correctly with no induced judder and the correct pull down is applied. 50Hz broadcast content is also displayed correctly with no obvious issues seen with frame skipping or micro stutter. Upscaling is also good, but this is where the Samsung S95C can look a little bit too processed with its sharpening and edges just looking a little false. Video processing is very good overall, it's just not as well polished as the LG or Sony. Moving to HDR10 and HDR10 Plus content, and the S95C is in its element with high quality sources. The colours are natural and bright with excellent accuracy and volume. However, most content just doesn't call for extreme brightness, volume or saturation, and as such there are instances in comparisons where the benefits are just not overly visible, but the Samsung certainly has colour headroom when it's required. Blacks are deep and shadow detail is also very good, but just above black can cause the S95C some slight issues, with some crush seen in certain scenes compared to the LG G3. HDR is stunning, and there is no doubt that the S95C is one of the very best TVs available right now, and making your choice, if you're in the market for a screen at this level, is going to be very difficult indeed. Again, we go into the picture measurements and comparisons in much greater detail within the written review at AV Forums, for those of you who like to nitpick through the data. Gaming is also a strong point for Samsung, with 4 HDMI 2.1 ports and the ability to run at a maximum of 4K 144Hz with a gaming PC, as well as super wide game view for PCs. With the latest generation of consoles, you get 4K 120Hz, FreeSync Premium Pro VRR support, ALLM, eARC and HDIG support. There is also the Samsung Game Hub with settings for all types of gamers, as well as access to gaming content without the use of a PC or console. Input lag measures in at 9.3 milliseconds with 4K 60Hz signals. We're about to show you some side-by-side comparison shots on video, but bear in mind that these are not representative of what I can see here in person, and they're captured by a camera with a restricted dynamic range. They're then edited and compressed to upload to YouTube, and then further compressed and changed by YouTube before you see them on your display, which is probably not calibrated, so it looks different again to what I can see here in person. So these clips are really for illustration only. First of all, we put the Samsung S95C up against the LG G3. Both of these TVs are retail purchase samples, the same as you would buy from any store. We set both to filmmaker mode out of the box, and the main difference seen is the look of white, which varies between QD-OLED and WRGB and is very noticeable when in side-by-side comparisons. Personally, in most cases, I prefer the white that's produced by QD-OLED, as it just isn't as cyan looking as the G3 and it looks more natural and warmer given its magenta push. It certainly comes down to the difference in the panels and their makeup, with the white pixel adding that cyan tint to WRGB. However, get each screen on their own and you really don't notice the different tints each has when seen next to each other. For overall picture quality, it's very difficult to separate each screen for colour and grayscale accuracy, and it's other attributes that tend to stand out. The LG G3 looks more natural and lifelike with most of the SDR and HDR movie content, as the S95C is just a tad too red and looks a little bit processed in comparison. Blacks are also better on the G3 with a much better just above black detail retrieval, and that results in a slightly better image depth and detail to the eye. But we're really talking about tiny details after hours and hours of side-by-side viewing. There's no doubt that each screen looks bright and vivid when the content calls for it, and the S95C has the edge for colour volume. In terms of peak brightness, the G3 looks that little bit more dynamic, married to its slightly better midtones and blacks, but again the margins are very tight here. With regards to SDR and HDR viewing in a bright room, both screens produce an image that competes with even the best LED LCD TVs on the market, and the old argument for LCD only in bright rooms is probably no longer the case in my opinion. These two will work perfectly in most rooms. The result is probably a draw, but in my opinion the LG just pips it for overall quality with better image processing, motion and upscaling, married to an image that just has a tad more dynamic range and depth. Samsung also doesn't have Dolby Vision, which may be an issue for some users. If you're looking for a flagship TV this year, you have a hell of a choice to make. Both of these TVs are absolutely stunning. Next, we moved on to two other Samsung models for comparison. The QN95C is the flagship 4K TV from Samsung and is a mini LED model. We set both TVs to filmmaker mode and used our usual test clips to assess picture quality in detail. Obviously the QN95C is a mini LED TV which has much brighter peak brightness capabilities, but it also has to suppress haloing, and this can impact on the overall picture quality and the dynamic range and contrast available. Blacks are much stronger on the S95C, as you would expect given that it's an OLED panel with instant on-off brightness from each and every pixel, whereas the QN95C has to use local dimming, backlight and mini LED grids to create the image. There's also issues with viewing angles on the QN95C which can impact the image if not viewed directly onto the TV. As such, the QN95C does look slightly washed out with raised blacks and a lack of overall contrast when viewed in direct comparison to the S95C in dim surroundings. There's also a really noticeable dimming down of small peak highlight areas in the image on the QN95C as it tries to suppress blooming around those areas, which again starts to restrict the dynamics and contrast of the image. This is also obvious in scenes with small specular highlight areas, such as light on the side of a honey spoon glistening from the Spears and Mansell demo footage, which it just looked dull on the QN95C compared to the S95C, which popped with brilliant dynamic range and contrast. Colours also look surprisingly muted on the QN95C when in direct comparison with the S95C, even though it is a QLED using quantum dots. This was noticeable with skin tones as well, with a muted look to films in direct contrast to the pop and wow factor on the QD-OLED. And even the usual strong point of bright room viewing, where the QN95C would be the first recommendation, wasn't as clear cut given the S95C is very bright and handled normal living room lighting in its stride. We were surprised with the results here, and the S95C definitely scored the best in the areas we test during our comparisons. Finally, we wanted to see how much of an improvement the S95C is over last year's S95B, and again, both of these are purchased retail units and set to filmmaker mode. As you would expect, there is very little difference between the S95B and S95C picture quality with the vast majority of content we tested. The colours are strong and natural looking. Reds are slightly too bright with slightly rosy skin tones, but it all looks dynamic with great pop and dynamic range. Both TVs looked great, and if we were picking out differences, the only issues we saw were slightly darker shadows on the S95B and some mild black crush compared to the slightly better shadows and depth and detail on the S95C. Everything else was very similar indeed in filmmaker mode out of the box, and it is cosmetic build quality and features that tend to stand out more than the very subtle image improvements that are very hard to see with normal TV and film content. The S95C is a step up from the S95B, but more in the cosmetics and the build quality, along with the One Connect box, and it stands out on these rather than the image quality differences, which are there, but they're just very difficult to see even in direct comparisons. We will obviously continue to perform comparisons once we get the new Sony, Panasonic and Philips models as the year progresses. So let's wrap this up. If you're looking for a new TV at this level of the market, you are going to have a very hard time deciding which one to go for. The Samsung S95C should offer some of the very best value for money as the year progresses, if the S95B price depreciation is to be repeated this year. Image quality is stunning, as you would expect at this level of the market, with superb colour volume capabilities and excellent HDR10 performance. There is no Dolby Vision support, which may be an issue for some buyers, and with some areas of performance like video processing, it's not quite as polished as the Sony and LG G3, but with everything else, including gaming, it's an excellent choice. Don't forget the full in-depth review at AV Forums goes into all of this in much more detail, so head over there and check it out. If you've enjoyed this review, then please do leave us a like, and if you want to see more TV reviews from AV Forums, including our thoughts on all of the 2023 flagship models, then please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.